Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Caster Calls with ZombieGrub. It is episode 62. I'm here with Tombizz, now very well known for the Valorant casting, but we'll definitely go over all of your history as we usually do. But first and foremost, thank you
Mm,
so much for coming on. I know Valorant's in the off season, but still definitely a very nice thing for you to do. And I'm looking forward to talking to you. I've been a fan of your work since I got into Valorant, so I guess for like 2+ years at
thank
this
you.
point now. Yeah, and I just thought you guys were doing such a fun, good job that I am very eager to talk to you. So, how you doing? What's up with you?
I'm not bad. It's the thing with the off season is more just trying to find stuff to do with my day. So I'm definitely more than happy to come on and have a chat for a little bit. It's always good to get stuff out there and release more things. So yeah, hopefully people are going to enjoy finding a little bit more about me.
Oh, I think they will. I think they will. So let's do the usual and start to just kind of go over your life. Maybe not all of your life, but certainly the ones that the aspects
Well, I
that
was
pertain to
born
esports.
in 1994. No,
There you go.
what do you want it from when I first got into commentary, like that sort of
Yeah,
idea?
yeah, if you think starting with video games, whenever you got into video games is worthwhile, then by all means, if you just want to talk about your professional commentary
Oh, I
career,
don't mind.
it's all good. Yeah, well, the more you talk, the better for me. It makes my job really easy. So by all means.
Uh, well, as a console scrub, I think that's the best way to start. Like, the initial games that got me interested in gaming were like the original Halos, like Halo 1 and 2. The first, I guess, competitive, not well, competitive. I would say, as in like a proper like versus setting was probably either playing FIFA, which I still play and still angers me to this day. In fact, has done within today, I will say, has annoyed me because that game is one of the most infuriating things to play in the universe. But also Gears of War 2. I love that game. I've also seen the Netflix are maybe going to do a show
Yeah.
about it, and I'm terrified because if that's bad, it will break my heart. But no, those are the games that sort of got me into the competitive scene. But even playing like Call of Duty on the Wii, which even saying that out loud nowadays, I feel like someone's gonna come for me, just be like, "Why would you play that on the Nintendo Wii?" But it's just the console I had at the time. And I will say, being able to aim with the like little Wii remote was fun. And anybody who disagrees with that just hasn't done it. That's all I'm gonna say. But no, up until I got a PC, which was a fair bit later. I don't know, probably like closer to when I was 17, 18, something like that. I didn't really have that sort of proper competitive gaming experience. And then there was CS:GO. And CS:GO was like the thing that basically not only got me super addicted and sort of competitive into those sort of games, but then actually introduced me like because of their like homepage and stuff into what esports was. And then you start seeing people like Kenny S, JW, Shocks doing things that you're like, well, I kind of wish I could do that, or maybe you do that once in like a blue moon. And I guess that sort of that was when really got into the sort of competitive side of gaming.
Hmm. And did you have aspirations to be a pro, or did you want to
No.
immediately into commentary?
uh, the thing is, well, I'll say because it will kind of link into how I ended up in esports in general. But I did a degree in marketing, which I enjoyed. I found it fun, but I was sort of like I never enjoyed school particularly. It wasn't something that was for me. Like I didn't mind doing stuff involved in business. I was okay at maths. Quite liked history, but it wasn't. There was no real field that I wanted to go into. So I ended up on a website called esportsjobs.com. And that was after watching, I think, like a few years of CSGO and just being like, okay, I don't know what I want to do in this field, but it would be pretty cool. And there was like a small Lithuanian company that was just like, we need a commentator, send in VODs. And I'd never even thought about it, never done it. I don't even think my PC could even handle streaming. But I was just like, okay, I can record myself commentating some games. And in CS, you can just watch whatever the top game was. I wasn't like going on Twitch and finding stuff. So I just picked the top game and just commentated over it. I actually ended up sending it to the pro player that was in that game, which is a guy called NATO Safix, who I'm now friends with, which is just quite funny because he's told me since, he was like, I don't know why I looked at what you sent me because it was like a waste of my time. I don't know why I did that, but I did. And now, because he actually decided to do some commentary, he went, and now you're doing better than me. And that really annoys me that I've almost helped you get to where you ended up. It sarcastically, because he is lovely. But yeah, I just sent it off to them, and I think the main thing was of people applying. I was probably the only person that was from England, so I had quite an inherent advantage
Hmm.
over a lot of the people who English wasn't their first language. So they heard me commentate, and they went, "Okay, we can't offer you any money for this, but do you want to just come and start casting some of our tournaments?" And it started to a ridiculous point where I had to get one of my friends to stream the game until I got a PC that could actually stream it. And then I would commentate. And every time I did that, he would say to me, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm just sat here. I'm not talking. You're just talking. And I'm just going, yeah, like every few minutes. But I don't know. I still do love CSGO so much. That was just one of those things where I was like, okay, if I can do this, even if I don't make money from it, I have fun doing it.
Mhm.
So
When was that? The year are we talking about?
2014, I
Okay.
guess, something
Yeah.
like that. Because I know that my first professional event was, I think, 2015, like the May
Hmm.
or something like that. Maybe it was even 2016, so it might be 2015, but somewhere around that, like 7, 8 years ago. And yeah, this was just me and one of my friends who I forced
Yeah.
commentating some matches.
Yeah, I remember back in the day that was actually like literally something you put on your quote unquote resume was that you had a PC that could
Mm.
stream.
Yeah,
And or even that honestly you had a mic that was decent. Like these are these are the things that a lot of people were looking
yeah.
for
I think I was
back in
using
the early days.
headset mic, so I imagine it was probably sort of like I was just in my own setup.
Probably.
So
Yeah. Yeah, that was my deal as well. Headset
mm,
mic for a long time, and then finally was convinced that it was, a better idea to get something better. But it was seriously like, the amount of interest that was there at that time, I imagine for CS:GO was kind of like the interest that was there for StarCraft back when 2010 and it
mm,
released was that, it was really, really huge. So I know CS:GO had kind
yeah.
of a down period initially, and then it got steadily better, and now it's one of the world's most popular esport. So yeah, basically they're just looking kind of for like voices. I'd say bodies, but looking for voices a lot of the time, and you just kind of hit it at the right timing. So it sounds
I got
like
lucky, yeah.
you. It also sounds like you rose really quickly. So that luckiness like really was quite lucky. You didn't put in 5 or 6 years before you got the first
Yeah.
gig. Yeah.
I
So within a
I was a
year.
bad person. I would say what not like awful, but what I was doing was so I did their stuff, and then someone was like, "Hey, we'll pay you like $3 to do the same thing," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's better than nothing." So I'd do that instead. But in the meantime, I was just messaging every single possible person in esports that I could. Like, I mean, like my email chain was just, I was the spam bot that you now receive in your spam. Like that was me. I was going, hey, I don't know if you know anyone here, but and I think it was actually a guy who was like managing at Hellraisers, who I don't even know what Hellraisers are doing anymore. But basically his email was on their website. I don't know why he did that. He probably deleted it straight after because he got emails from me. But he went, "Oh yeah, I actually know one of the producers at Starladder. I'll give him your name." And then that guy messaged me on Skype. Yeah, Skype. And
Yep.
that there's young people out there going, "What's a Skype?" It's like Discord but bad.
Yeah,
That's what
much worse.
Skype is. But yeah, he messaged me on there and was just like, I don't know how you've ended up getting in contact with me, but are you interested in doing some of our online qualifiers? And again, that was when I think one of them was like, so what is the equivalent of like it's not called the minor anymore, but in CSGO obviously you had the minors,
Hmm.
which was before. I think it's like the teams that qualify to where we get to, like the major qualifier would have been top 24, and then that goes to top 16. So it's like
Yeah.
basically what the RMR is now. And it was like, hey, are you up for commentating the whole CIS minor on your own? I'm like, yeah, yeah, why yeah, why not? I can do that. And yeah, just opportunities like that came around because they were just like, okay, this guy would literally cast anything, and I ended up just slowly them. But they actually were paying me. I'm not gonna put any slander on Starladder's name because they were paying me to do it and paying me a decent amount, so I can't complain there. But yeah, that it was pretty meteoric in a sense. I think from 6 months of just grind of basically doing it for free, and then ended up getting paid for it.
Mhm. I'd say so. The fact that it was a year between starting and getting paid, uh, in a time as well where I think it was still kind of sketchy as to like whether people were paying the the B, C, D tiers. So I think that's really
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
You might have come in at a time where it started to be more likely, but still, I'd say that's very fast. Would you 6, 7 years later, would you suggest doing a similar tactic? You said you were a bad person for this, so it seems a little cloudy, but you
Uh,
got results?
I would say I don't think there's a problem with messaging people, like emailing people. I think if you spam the same person repeatedly again and again and again, then yeah, you you're gonna get blocked. You're gonna get ignored by that person. That's not gonna have any success. But mine was more. I think people in esports, and I think a testament to that to this day. Okay, sure, people will ignore you, but I don't think there's any problem with that. But there are a lot of people who won't. I think there's a lot of very friendly and welcoming people in esports. I know that a lot of people you might become talent managers or admins or all these different like fantastic jobs that will take you to all over the world by basically just knowing people. So I
Mm,
think like people going to local UK lands, or in my case, it was I traveled to Lithuania twice and I traveled to Estonia once before I ended up. So that was all within like the 6 month year period. Was I went to a few lands over there, and that was sort of the scene that I ended up watching and casting a lot. So that was sort of my setup where it was like when I went to my first like proper gig, I'd done 3 lands under my belt from for free from other places. So it it can definitely work out for you, and especially I think in more niche scenes where they're not going to have the budget to basically go, hey, like I don't know, Anders, can you come out here? And like, they're not going to be able to do that. So if you're willing to put the grind in, and hey, like if you find the right person, then I don't think it's a bad tactic.
mm.
But I will say, if you are doing that, you also have to be then willing to do whatever the job is. If they come back, if someone does say, "Hey, I actually do have a bone for you," and then you go, "Nah, I kind of fancy myself a little bit bigger than that," then yeah, you're not gonna succeed.
Right, yeah. And so you said that the first job they offered, you were supposed to do all of it alone. We're
Yeah,
talking literally like you're doing the production and solo casting the entire time?
I think so. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
definitely
okay.
solo casting. I'm pretty sure production. It was the loosest of terms. It was just me because obviously CS you can just join a Go TV and just stream. So it's
Mm,
I was there wasn't much production, and at points like further down the line, they had some like software that they sent me, and it was basically they preloaded all of the overlays, and all I had to do was click a button. So it was solo casting, but I don't want to say I was like out in the trenches. It was a long day, but it
yeah.
wasn't like I didn't have to do a million different jobs.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's fair. Certainly when I think of production, I do think of, pressing a few more buttons, but it sounds like it's
Yeah,
actually pretty easy for CS:GO. But the reason I asked it was actually just to talk to you about solo casting and the eventual having to co-cast. That sometimes
yeah,
is a big hurdle for a lot of people. It's going to be pretty common because it is hard to find a consistent co-caster when you're building yourself up.
for sure.
So I hear a lot of people have trouble with becoming a good co-caster, and frankly, I like before I gush too much, I'll gush a little. I do think you have wonderful chemistry with your current casting partner,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you guys are pretty well known for that. So I don't think I'm being like necessarily fangirl or something like that. So you've gone a long way. Would you say that you started out pretty good? Like it kind of just was a natural thing. You got a co-caster, you're like, oh, this is whatever. Or was
Uh,
there a big hurdle for you?
I think that the thing with CS:GO, especially when you're going through, like when you're starting from the very bottom and going all the way up, is you are correct. Like getting a consistent duo was impossible, and especially for the first couple of years, I casted with a lot of people who I don't even think they expected to do much more in esports. They were just like, oh, this will be fun, and so you're grinding to be the best. They're like, okay, I'll do this as a bit of a side gig, and then you're at very, very different places. I think also the biggest danger, and I would this is the biggest piece of advice I'd give to any up and coming commentator is you don't need to try and be the star. Like it's something, especially like coming up in tier 3, tier 4 CS. Most people want to be the Sadikist, the Anders, the Scrawny, the Harry, like play by play, where they're just going to be they have the lines written out on the paper and they're ready to go, and they're willing to just scream over whoever is sat next to them to be that very best person. And it is, you'll listen to that cast back and you go, damn, I nailed that line. And then the other like 25 minutes is just you trying to shout over the guy who's next to you. And that's something that I think, even though I agree my duo is a million times better than probably anything that happened in CS, because I didn't have a consistent duo.
Mm,
The one thing I actually did sort of pride myself on was, okay, I'm going to go into this and I'm going to try and make this look good, not me look good.
mm.
Because I think very, very quickly you have to learn that just because you might look good in a cast, it doesn't mean the cast is good.
Right, yeah. And I think that's a very obvious important, but that is like the biggest obstacle that people will instantly recognize, right? They'll be like, "Well, I was clearly talking over that guy." Or
Yeah.
when they look back on their VODs, hopefully they realize it and they move on and they
Yeah,
adapt.
just don't think they might be thinking that guy was talking while I should be talking, and then it's
That's
a really
true.
dangerous ground.
Yeah, that's they're probably not too far along their casting career. I would guess anyways. But I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, so that is obviously a very important thing. Not focusing so much on yourself, taking away the hype moments just because you feel like you're the one like deserving of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's especially problematic for people who do consider themselves to be play by play as more of the color role. I think you guys
Mm.
do a great job of kind of like mixing it together when necessary in a very fast
Yeah.
paced game, but as more of the color role, do you have any equivalent there as far as moments where you realize that you're not being the best co-commentator you can be?
I think it's always tough. Like for me and Mitch, we try, like my goal is always to have it sort of 70-30. Like I think he's a fantastic play by play, but he loves to analyze. And I think I'm a good color, but I do like to do a bit of play by play. So, and we would rather have the cast flowing well than 100-0. Like he always gets
Mhm.
whatever the play by play is, and I always get the color, because I just don't, for us, at least as a duo, I know for others it's very different, but for us, it's like, if we had it even just bang on 50-50 or 100-0, it would just feel uncomfortable. It would feel unnatural, because we want to have fun. We want to have a conversation. We want to talk about different moments. And either of us can be wrong in those moments. Like I could see something, I go, I think they did this because of this. And he'll have a completely different opinion and come back the other way. And I'll go, yeah, you know what? It could have been that. And we may never know because of the way the game is gone, but it's more of a discussion. And for us, at least, I don't know if it's everyone's cup of tea, but I always like the idea that people can go, okay, I've almost felt involved in that conversation, rather than one guy is telling me what I should think and the other one's making me excited. So I would say for me as a color, I'm always going to try, and if the conversation feels like I can drop it to him at the right moment for him to go nuts and sort of scream his lungs out, I will do that. If it doesn't, he'll do the same for me. And I think that's why it really does take that sort of, like, especially for us at the beginning, if you go back and watch our cast, it's not like that. It's one of us casting for 45 seconds and 45 seconds of fun. And I hate going back and watching those. It makes my skin shiver, because I'm just like, I'm screaming at myself to shut up, and I'm then doing the exact same to him, and he's doing it as well. So I think the biggest thing is a color. Firstly, if you are in a set duo, set those boundaries. If there's a guy who is not comfortable doing color, don't make him do color. Like it's very
Mm,
straightforward. If your duo, if you're both very experienced and knowledgeable of the game, you can mix and match a bit. Maybe one of you is sublime at hitting that hype moment. Set that person up to do that. And that's so for us, it's more okay. We feel like both of us can do both to a solid degree. We definitely lean slightly so that Mitch is more play by play and I'm more color. But it's very dependent on just us trusting each other to go, okay, I know if I ask Mitch a question about anything in Valorant, he's going to know the answer. And even if he doesn't, even if it's that 1% of the time he doesn't, he's just going to make a joke about it and send it back my way. And the same with, if I know that there's about to be a crazy exciting moment, I know at any time I can just go, take it away, Mitch, and he's going to do the job. And
mhm.
that's all it is. It's just trust. And I think that, again, when you're up and coming, that's the biggest thing is if you've come in and you've casted with this guy twice, you don't trust him to do the job you can do. And then it's really, really difficult. Whereas if again you look at, I think Harry and Hugo's another great example. Harry will always know if he gives Hugo play by play, he's going to nail it. It might not be his role necessarily within the game, but he will do it. And it's the same if you look at someone like Moses. Moses, to every degree, is a color caster. But if you give that man a play by play, he will hit those high notes. He's fantastic at it. And Henry G is another prime example of that. You'll always think of him as this very high, knowledgeable, analytical mind. But if he needed to play by play, he could play by play. It's just the way their duo is set up that it leans more towards the other person.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to impromptu partners, or even let's say like temporary partners, because I think there's people out there who kind of instinctually kind of figured this out. They're like, well, very much so. The initial conversation that I've overheard many times is like, "Are you color? Or are you play by play?" And they kind of run with
Yeah.
that. But that's a decent basis. But then there's those points where one of them really drops the ball, and then I think the problem arises when you go with that person again. So you're not
Yeah.
necessarily like a long-term duo that's committed to improving together. You're kind of just like always doing a couple of side gigs together. And that's where I think you see the trust really isn't there because they dropped the ball that one time and there was no honest discussion about it. So the color fills in for the play-by-play because they think the play-by-play person
Yeah, yeah.
isn't going
I
to do it.
can see that.
Yeah.
Why again, I think like if you look at the amount of people I've casted with going back to CS, like I've casted with Vince, probably one of the best play by players you're ever going to listen to. Man is brilliant. So in that role, I know instinctively I go into color. Then another event I casted with Pimp. Why? I know my roles are play by play. You're not going to have Pimp doing the play by play because he's one of the best analysts
Mhm.
in the game. And it just whoever I would that would be always the tough thing going into any gig in CS:GO is my duo was changing all the time. I think the people I casted with most were probably Vince and at a time Harry and Hugo. Like even as just a trio interchanging. Like I casted with Harry like one of the ESL ones. So it's like in that role, I know that I'm going to be doing more of the color side. So
Mhm.
I think again, if you know going into a lot of these things what your role is, and you sometimes you don't even need to communicate because again, like when I'm casting with Vince, I know I'm color because I'm not going to try and outgun him at play by play. It doesn't make a lot of sense for me to try and do that. So I think there's a skill in knowing what you need to be doing to make the duo better. And sometimes I will agree for some play by plays, it might just be that okay, I'm the better play by play. I should be doing it more, but especially again lower down the tiers of casting, which seems almost weird to say, but you have to then understand that sometimes even if you might be better at a certain role in the moment, it might be better for you to actually take a step off because this person is just going to try and scream louder and louder and louder until both of you are just breaking your microphones.
Right. Yeah. And it goes back to making the product good. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah. Yes. So, you brought it back to just making the product look really good. That's what's most important. So to avoid any of those incidents, try your best to avoid those incidents where like I'm pretty sure I could do this better, but we're just gonna get into a bit of a shouting match or
Yeah.
a weird like one up on the color side even. So as I was saying, it's a really important thing for casters to learn, but it sounds like you learned it really early on, and then I failed an analogy about a tool that can do many things. So that was great. But you it sounds like you became someone who could fit in any slot. And that's sometimes very much invaluable to tournament organizers and potentially got you a lot of credit. But this is where I have to, of course, ask you because honestly, I've only started getting into like the FPS side of esports in general in the last like 3, maybe 4 years, which is a
Hmm.
decent amount of time at this point, but overall in the history of esports really isn't. So you're mentioning all these great names and you've cast with them. It's fantastic. I know you came from a CS:GO background, as many people in Valorant did. Um, we should continue on with like a little bit of like the chronological thing here. So you got your first gig. You've kind of done good enough to impress a lot of people. You start working with some of the best and most popular names in CS:GO.
Hmm.
And when would you say that, you were working with some of those names? What year are we talking about? 17, 18?
It's kind of weird because I was sort of having a think about this. The first event I did was actually kind of absurd. Like you're going back to like I think it was the literally the first major thing, 2016. And on that event, you had Henry G, Sadakist, like Natu Vendetta. So they were all tier one at the time. So it was kind of odd because although that event was like a huge start, ultimately all of the stuff I was doing, even for the next like I want to say maybe 1.5 years, was all with Starladder because I basically I was with them on a contract.
Oh,
So ultimately, although I didn't expand out much in CS:GO, I was like I went over to Ukraine. I stayed there a fair bit and did like different stuff for that organization. So I would do the Star Ladder events, which some of them were like 250K events at the time, had pretty much all of the top teams, top talent. So that was why I got to work with a lot of different people because I felt like Star Ladder as an organization had a lot of faith in me and were just continuing to put me with people that maybe I necessarily shouldn't have commentated with, but I was very lucky to. Like early on, I cast events with people like Launders, who are now one of the biggest and the best currently in color casting. So there are a lot of people that I'm very lucky to have worked with, and as it went through those sort of years, it was like me, Scrawny, Hugo, Harry, especially, who I feel like we were sort of like slowly making our way forward as a group of friends. Like they were people I've gotten with for a very very long time. So I'm like they're people now that it feels so surreal. Like watching those events, like watching the CS:GO major, for example, and it's like the three people I came up with are doing the CS:GO major, and then I'm doing the Valorant major. It's like that's so weird. Like I feel like one of us should have failed. It sounds horrible, but I feel like there's no way that all like the people I was working with, like doing like the ESCA stuff, doing like random qualifiers for different events, and all four of us have done well. It's very very nice.
I get what you're saying. Usually, there's always one person that, at the very least,
Yeah,
decides.
it should have been me. It should have been me. I'll be honest. Those guys are
There
way
you go.
too talented. It should have been me.
But they usually decide like I'm not gonna go for that. I'm gonna go in this other direction for
Yeah.
various reasons. And it's not because they were the worst commentator or they
No.
didn't want to put in the effort necessarily. There's a lot of different reasons that it's happened. So that's one of the reasons we have a lot of people who used to be commentators who actually work kind of like the big jobs, the big kahuna jobs that like ESL, for instance, now, like Apollo.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying. That was kind of a funny thing to say. But yeah, you guys are all very successful. Do you look back on that and do you ever think like, well, if I had just stuck with CS:GO, this is the same place I'd be?
Mm,
Or do you look back on it and kind of think, no, I think it made sense. Like if I'd stayed in CS:GO, there
yeah.
would have been a plateau.
Well, I think there was like I've been asked by like friends and people I knew, or even just like my family who really don't understand anything about video games. So they'll pretend to, but they don't. Uh, and would be like, why did you change? Because I wasn't like I wouldn't say I was failing. In fact, I think the last obviously it was sort of COVID time. The last year I worked fully in CS, I financially was probably the best. Like because it was that sort of COVID period where there was just tournaments every single day. I was doing the like DreamHack RMRs and stuff like that, and still doing stuff with ESL. But it was firstly I wanted to rebrand myself for starters. Like I don't think I've said this anywhere before, but my initial plan in Valorant was not to be a commentator. I wanted to go straight in as an analyst because I was like,
Mm.
I think realistically for me, there wasn't anybody in CS that I could concrete set a duo with. Like I liked working with Vince, but he liked to cast with Dust as well, so I didn't feel like there was going to be massive like beneficial like putting in this hard graft. Again, like people like Harry and Hugo, they created a fantastic duo. Scrawny was with Launders. Like these are all people that I wouldn't even want to go anywhere near their duo because I enjoyed listening to them. So it would have been weird. Like, oh yeah, I want to try and destroy the duo that I enjoy. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you have obviously the very tier one, and I was like, okay, can I? Is there a way that I could find someone to duo with, build up a duo to the point where I can now compete with those people? Probably not. And then you've got the analyst game where you've got like crazy strong analysts, like people like Sponge, who obviously then moved into commentary with Machine. You've got the likes of Maniac, you've got Pimp, you've got like pro players coming through, you've got Blair, who is another person who absolutely love to death. And then I go like, okay, can I compete in the hosting positions? It's like where you've got people like Banks, Freya, Frankie, like Stunner. Like there's so many just unbelievable talent in CS:GO, and it's like okay, to completely rebrand myself into a position where I could even do as well as those people is going to be such a long graft. Whereas in Valorant, it was fresh. And I was like, okay, will there be as many people who will straight away jump over as an analyst, have 5 or 6 years experience in CSGO, which has its similarities, and put in as much effort as I do? Okay, there'll be some, but I didn't think I was like, okay, there probably won't be as many. And then circumstances ended up happening where I knew Mitch. He like his duo was Banks, who obviously does like a multitude of different games, ended up doing other stuff. And I was like, okay, if he's gonna move over to play by play and I can color, I think that that's a strong enough duo that that's worth me going. Okay, I won't be an analyst. I'll cast instead.
Yeah, okay. And that's a fascinating time period. There's been plenty of, very obvious big esports on the horizon that people tried to jump on.
Mm.
And I always point to like Heroes of the Storm as one of the first ones. Because that's, Dota kind of came up with its people, then got popular. CSGO, same thing. League of
Yeah,
Legends. There wasn't like this huge swath of like prepared talent that was ready to
yeah, yeah,
move until a little bit later into like modern esports, if you will. So Valorant comes along, and it's probably the most famous example because it's copying to a degree. Sorry, Valorant. But it's copying to a degree a proven popular esport.
yeah,
And its publisher, its company, is also proven to be, very much dedicated and interested and successful in esports with League of Legends. So obviously, it's one of the biggest examples of like if you're going to jump on something, if you can,
yeah,
go for it. But I gotta imagine that you were up against a lot of other people that were doing the exact same thing. As you said, you didn't think there'd be the
yeah.
same exact scenario, and most importantly, they wouldn't work as hard as you, which I imagine was a big one. But but how did swimming in that pool go? Like was it just kind of like, well, I got a gig and that gig ended up being coincidentally the most popular one? Did you kind of scout out what would be big, who were going to be the most promising, who to, hook your wagon onto type of situation? Seriously, just like talk me through your kind of
uh,
transfer over because I think it's fascinating.
Well, the first thing I did was kind of like I dipped my toe in a bit. Like so for example, again, Banks and Mitch were people that the first events I did were as an analyst alongside them. So you had the guys at WePlay who I'd already worked with before doing an Ignition event, and the WePlay studio at the time, not an exaggeration, 10-minute walk from my apartment in Ukraine. So I was like, guys, like literally, I'm diving headfirst into this game. I'd love to do this event with you. And they were more than happy to bring me in. So, because they knew me from CS, they knew me from other stuff. So they knew if I was going to do it, I was going to do it properly. With some of the others, it was more so just, again, just getting my name out there, like doing some stuff with FaZe. But I think the main thing for me was more so another reason why I moved in the first place is I test. There were a lot of games I tested to see if I could commentate. One of them was PUBG because I was told by a lot of different agencies like PUBG is going to blow up. It's a big game. People enjoy it, especially the mobile side of it. People really enjoy. I didn't have a lot of fun playing the game, and so for me to sort of properly put in the effort, I tried playing like 30, 40, 50 hours of that game, and I was just like, I haven't had 10 minutes of fun. So and that's not to harp on PUBG as a game. It's just not for me. Like I like things to be fairly fast paced. So like for me, Apex was quite fun. That was another game that there's probably VODs out there of me like casting that on the side just to give it a go alongside CS:GO. But with Valorant, it was more so I got access to the beta. I got talking to a lot of different people. People like James and Mitch were very happy to just go, okay, well, we're gonna cast. We would like Tom to come with us because if they're gonna have an analyst, they want it to be someone that they know is putting as much time and effort into the game as they were. So it was almost like we went around as a group. And James has a hell of a lot of context. One of the other ones was Blast. He goes to Blast. Okay, Blast want him, and he goes, okay, I want Tom and Mitch because again, I know that they're going to do the work. So I owe a lot to him. He's someone again I worked with a fair bit in CS:GO and has always been very supportive of my career. So I'm only thankful to Banks. But yeah, I think it was more so that for everybody at that time, it was like, okay, if all three of us go in, work as hard as we can and just go to different events and go, look, here's us doing this event, here's us doing this event. And luckily with Blast and we played, they were already people we knew. So it was just easier than anyone else for us to go, okay, we'll do your event. And they go, oh, yeah, we know you from CS. So it wasn't that tough.
Yeah, okay. So, understandable uh line here to draw between just CS:GO, working with a bunch of people, networking, as you had said
Mm.
earlier, and getting a lot of Valorant gigs, but a lot of personal recommendations as well, which means that you're doing a
Yeah.
good job. So that's pretty important factor. But you mentioned, you tried other esports. You put a lot of hours into something you didn't end up enjoying, and that kind of confirmed it for you. Was that your process into learning new games?
Yeah.
I imagine you're mostly, if not entirely, focused on Valorant at this point, but at that time, your process was
Oh,
just playing video games.
yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's like my process will always be if there's a competitive setting to watch, that will always be my sort of star. Like I always like to watch esports when I'm doing just normal stuff within my day, be it playing another game. I bit of a scatterbrain, so I'll always have multiple things on multiple monitors just to entertain myself almost. And I'm nearly always watching something esports or something sci-fi. Like those are the two that I'll go for. So it's not that hard in that regard for me to just like sort of learn things in that. But I also find that for me, especially, to commentate a game that I don't enjoy will just lead down a road of me not putting in as much effort because I have to almost be so in love with the game that I want to play it. I want to watch it. I want to see the content side of it. It's the same with like every time the Valorant releases a new agent, I'm the first person who wants to try that agent, mess around with it in a server on my own for a bit, or with Mitch, or be it in some of the competitive settings, or play some of those silly tournaments on the side just for fun, like some of the charity ones that the Goose House do. Like I enjoy that sort of stuff. So, or the recent Spike Nations one, which blasted, which was ultimately just you watch streamers playing this new agent and you learn new things like that. That for me is so much fun that then when it's like, oh, and now what does this agent do? I'm like, oh, well, I've been watching it for the last 6 hours, even though it's only been out for five. So it, it's one of those things where again, I'll go back to PUBG. It sounds like I'm just harping on that. It's funny because I was at I think it was the Gamescom where it's the very first PUBG event, and I do enjoy the sort of competitive setting. The problem I had though is like, firstly, I'm dreadful at the game because I'm so impatient that I just get killed instantly because it's like the idiot running around in the open while everybody else is hiding in a tree. I just don't have the patience for it. But it was just also like there's a lot of sort of collection and doing all of this stuff of knowing where all these different things are, and that never really appealed to me. Whereas with, for example, games like CS:GO, like Valorant, you're very much this is the round, this is the amount of finances you have. You need to earn this to be able to do this. You have to plant the spike. It's very much, and then it resets, and you have another round to do it again. Whereas you're not queuing into a match again for another like 20 minutes because you messed up once and died to the guy hiding in a
Mhm.
tree. It's much more, I guess, instant gratification. It's probably the reason. Again, I've played FIFA now for the last 10, maybe more, probably more, 15 years, when it enrages me to my core because of some of the flaws within the game
Hmm.
and the flaws within my skill. But because it is that sort of like, okay, I queue up, I play a match, I get a reward or a loss, then I do it again. And it's very sort of repetitive. Whereas with other games, like I found that with Apex because you can have that sort of like fast paced run around aggro style, but in games like Valorant and CS, I feel like it's more okay, you have the setup, maybe that doesn't work, you do it again, you reset, you try again, you reset, you try again, and
Mhm.
it's more, I don't know, instant gratification, I guess.
Yeah, I absolutely know what you're talking about, and this is it's making me think a lot here. There's a reason that CS:GO and Valorant as well, but Valorant even to a lesser degree. But anyways, like it's super simple to watch.
Yes.
And I think one part of it is this like, you kind of understand innately like click on head a little bit difficult, but click on head good. So that's always what they reduce it down to. But even if you do take another step forward and kind of learn about the economy a little bit, it's still relatively simple. Um,
Yeah.
but you're talking about the way that it's designed, and I've always known that there is a certain amount of like, I've always been envious, for instance, of the analysts throwing to the casters and then boom, you're right into the action. The pistol round's really important.
Yeah.
Comparing it to traditional sports, Yeah, that also is like you don't really have like an early, mid, and late game so much in these esports and traditional games as well. I mean, you kind of do as far as talking about like fatigue and learning strategies throughout the game, and then for the esports side of things, the economy has a little bit of that ebb and flow. But yeah, for the most part, it's not equivalent to a PUBG late game where you've collected your tier 3 armor and like your amazing
Yeah.
guns, or to a StarCraft game where our sections are very much distinct. Um, so that's fascinating. I've never thought about it before. Sorry for just kind of talking, but
Oh, that's all
that's
good.
I think that's why these games are so broadly appealing that even the casuals can get into it. You're right. It's kind of instant. You're in the game, you understand the game. The game doesn't really
Mm.
change that much, and it just keeps on going round, round, and round,
Well, it's
round.
like if you miss 10 rounds of a Valorant game and you come in at round 11, you know what's happening. You can roughly guess what happened before. And even if the first round you see is that one round going to the other team, that can be exciting. Even if, and that's the thing, then that team that was 10-0 up could lose 13 rounds in a row. And you're still getting that same excitement, if anything, maybe more so because you saw them from 10-0 down. Whereas I'm not going to pretend to try and understand StarCraft. I've watched it once. There was a WSG Middle Eastern qualifier,
Ah.
and I forgot it. It was Stefano.
Oh my
Stefano
gosh,
went
that
and he
one.
played against the Middle Eastern teams. He was wearing no shoes. I think he fell asleep before the game began, and then he banged out the guy 3-0.
Yeah,
And I was like, I don't know what just happened, but I know that guy's really good. So that's roughly my knowledge of the game, but it's like I understand the fact that if you were losing for like the majority of a StarCraft game, probably the fact is there's not really a comeback. Like by that point, you might give up
yeah,
or you've already lost. Like if the other guy's been better than you for the first 10 minutes, it's probably a bad sign. Whereas I think that's the thing with like CSGO and Valorant is even though at 12-0 the comeback is unlikely, it's not impossible. And that
hmm
that still adds that excitement if a team then wins 8 rounds in a row that it's like, oh my god, this is a different game now.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's a lot of reasons I think that those games work out very well. Far less race and faction hate and refusal to watch. You're not cheering for a particular terrorist team.
Mm,
So, anyways, but yeah, moving on from that kind of vague philosophical discussion of esports. As you said, you just really enjoyed Valorant, so you really got into
yeah.
it. And I would say that you also had a pretty decent quick rise in Valorant as well, to a point where, again, this is kind of when I started to get a little bit more into it. The very beginning of Valorant, I feel like you had a lot of different people who were like maybes. Maybe they'd be the go-to casters for a lot of tournaments, but it wasn't really set in stone. And even this year wasn't so set in stone, with a couple of pairs coming in like Brennan Sideshow. But
Yeah.
yeah, you've broken through the mess, the noise, as guys who are casting the semifinals. So yeah, on that aspect, let's talk about basically how you got there. Your process working with Mitch. So you at that point you were like, I'm going to work with these guys. These guys are vouching for me. I think we really work well together, and we're doing great, fantastic. But then you also mentioned that you went back to your VODs and watched yourself talk for 45 seconds. So what were some of the growing pains that you remember having, since that would have been more recent than your CS:GO casting?
I think one of the main things that was the case for both myself and Mitch, and I think Mitch will always blame himself more so for this, but I won't let him. And it is like the idea, especially when you have come through commentating with a lot of different people, like Mitch, his level in CS wasn't like he didn't get to the very, very top, at least as a sort of like commentator or a color. He was doing a few analyst gigs here and there, but it is that sort of idea of, especially a lot of the time, having to carry the cast. And so when our duo began, there were always aspects of like you kind of want to do more than you need to. And I think that was the thing that we always try and work on is like we now have got to the point where we do as said, like trust each other to okay, I can ask any question to this person and they're gonna know the answer, even if it's something ridiculous like what they had for breakfast. Like you're gonna have something prepared or something silly like a quip to throw back to. And I think the main growing pain we had was for starters, and it's still something we need to work on to this day. A lot of the time, we would quote unquote overdo it because we both get really excited over the silliest little thing. And a lot of the time, some of the like maybe more casual viewers or even some of the more experienced viewers will go, okay, they've gone a bit far with talking about how they used this Viper's Pit 7 rounds ago, and they're still talking about it now. Like that was one of the biggest issues we had was just okay, we need to forget things and move on with the rest of the game if it didn't necessarily impact it at this stage. But also then just okay, I have spoken about this topic for however many seconds. I need to now give my co-caster space because we're both trying to like almost geniusly break down whatever play is coming. The Then you talk for too long, and then you maybe miss the beginning of the next round. The other person is sat there like, come on, let me talk, let me talk. So I think we've definitely got better than that. I think there's been pressures when it comes to like when we did our first cast in front of a crowd. I think we fell back into a couple of old crutches where it's like, oh, I'm nervous, so I'll talk more because I don't know what to like. I don't like sitting there in my own head when there's a few thousand people behind you. But I think the thing we always find, and it's something I really enjoy, is that every time we get a new hurdle, like it could be first international event, okay, first couple of casts maybe a little bit rough, then we improved. First international LAN event, again, for a couple of rough casts, and then we grow into it. Maybe the nerves get away, and then it's like first international event with a crowd, which most of the time is the peak. And again, it's like by the second cast, you're like, okay, the nerves have gone. We're back into our rhythm. We're having fun with it. And I think that's the main thing for us. If both of us are having fun and enjoying things, and then maybe had an energy drink, then we're both gonna have a good day.
And I think you guys and your energy are really the highlights of your duo. Not that your analysis is less than stellar or that your play by play is less than
Mm.
stellar, but it really feels like you guys are kind of pushing your way to the most casual friendly is a really weird term because sometimes it can be used as a kind of a derogatory way, but
Mm.
it's kind of where I'm going with. People know that you're like when you're excited because it does
Yeah,
absolutely feel genuine, and that helps translate to a broader audience. Would you guys say that you kind of picked up on that? Do you consider that part of your brand, or is this just a natural byproduct?
it's definitely natural. Like I think that the hardest thing you could ever ask us to do would be to fake energy. I just can't imagine either of us doing it. Like both of us have this sort of brutal mentality at times that if something is bad, it is bad, and to hype it up in a degree that it's not is just silly. And I think the only person in our duo has done that ever is me, and that would just be if the stature of the game demands more. So, like
Mm,
for example, if it's in a semi-final, I want the semi-final to be good, so I might try and overplay something that's not that good. And those at times have been my least favorite casts to look back on because I'd be like, I know in that moment that I was trying to force something that wasn't there, and if we just casted this as we do naturally, it would have sounded better. And again, that's something that
mm,
we've looked back on since some of the initial events and gone, okay, we don't need to fake it because when something crazy happens, we will have a good time. I think in terms of catering to the overall audience, I don't think it's not something we've ever done intentionally. It's like I think both of us have a lot of fun sort of analyzing different plays, but try to keep it so everyone will understand. Like I
mhm.
don't want to alienate casual viewers, but I also don't want to alienate the hardcore viewers because I think that if anybody's ever played with us or watched even just what we do in our spare time, we are definitely some of the nerds there with them that just love Valorant more than anything. And probably my favorite thing has been talking to different like pro players and them sort of saying like, "Oh no, actually, we really enjoy your cast," and that's something that means a lot to me because it's like I think it's very easy when we're sort of guessing, which is the same as any duo will do. We're guessing what teams are doing in the moment because unless we are there, we'll never really be able to know. That's basically the job is trying to be the best at guessing. And if a pro player comes up to me and goes, "Oh, I watched that and I really enjoyed that," I go, "Okay, that means that my guessing was pretty good." But at the same time, as you said, I think a lot of the people who are just more casual and tune in and want to have a laugh and have a good time will sort of watch us and go, "Okay, they are having fun, I'm having fun," and
Mhm.
that's important to me as well.
'Cause that can be what people mean when they say that you apply broadly. They
Yeah,
mean that you've dumbed things down. Yeah, that definitely isn't what I was talking about with you guys. But that is a legitimate question. So there, Tastosis is one of the biggest examples. StarCraft, kind of
I loved
all
listening to them
worldwide.
in Valorant. They were so funny. They were so funny.
I listened to them as well, and I watched the feedback too, and that was a good time. Because people liked them, for being kind of
Oh,
outrageous, even though they didn't know what
I
they're
loved it.
doing.
I loved it.
Yeah, but they in StarCraft, they literally make it a point. I've discussed it with them. They literally make it a point for grand finals to make sure to kind of reiterate really basic concepts, which some
Yeah.
people think is exactly what
I
you should be
I
doing.
had a conversation with James Bardoff about that in the past.
Okay.
Like one of the things he'll always aim to do, and it's something I've actually slightly stolen. He's someone. So if I go back, there's something I didn't mention, and I'd like to just briefly. When I was coming up very early on, him and DDK actually, I went to the Face It offices. They reviewed one of my demos and ripped the shit out of it. Like I mean, like I left that room devastated, but also it was probably some of the most helpful feedback I've ever received. So, because that's the thing I'll say is with people who give feedback to maybe their friends or example, it is kind of worthless because a lot of the time you don't want to shatter your friend's confidence. Whereas they were more than happy to go, okay, this guy needs serious feedback to actually be good enough to compete with some of the people who are up there. And so they told me everything I was doing wrong. I will say that probably about 95% of it, I was like, I agree. Like, you are correct, and I need to work on that. And some of that was just being a little bit more emotive when I cast, which I think if you look at how I am nowadays, both me and Mitch could be on the floor at sometimes because we're so invested in these games. So I think that was very helpful. But to sort of go back to where we were, he was someone who had every sort of big game they would cast, he would point out a player he thinks it's important to highlight so that any viewer at home can go, okay, James says I should look at this person. And so it just gives you a slight idea, something you can sort of almost play along with at home. You go, okay, he said that this person's going to do well, and they're actually not doing well. So that must mean that this isn't going the way it should do. And then it's something a little bit more interesting. And it's very, very basic, but I think it's a
Hmm.
great thing to look at, especially in Valorant when, for example, you go into a map where a certain player switches up an agent and you go, okay, they have brought in this agent for this. That's going to be a highlight. So let's see if it works. And that's something I'll always try and do no matter what level we get to in the game, like be it grand final, doesn't matter. It's like, have a look at this player. They're doing something different. Let's see if it works.
Hmm.
And that works for everybody. Now, of course, there will be people at home who goes, no shit. And that's fine. Like, that doesn't matter because ultimately that point wasn't for you. You're already going to be looking for that. But the thing is, and this, I think it's Jess who normally says it's like, I think people at Riot have said it as well. Sorry, Jess Goat.
Yeah.
She says that where it's like 90% of the audience, probably higher, are going to be casual viewers, especially when it gets later in tournaments because the viewership goes maybe from 50K to 500K. You think those 450K people have all been sat there watching the game as much as you? No, they haven't. So it is worth doing those little things. Now, as I said, for the majority of the cast, it's never a focus, but those are things I've picked up from different people along the way where it's like, that's a good thing to do to get everybody as invested in the game as you are. And maybe they then convert over to being that hyper fan in the future. And
Yeah.
that's what we aim for.
Well, I think that's an additional part of the discussion because it is a discussion, But you're bringing
Mm.
up kind of different types of ways of dumbing, not dumbing things down, of just highlighting basic elements to kind of force not force the story, but help the story along. So when you
Yeah,
say like point to this person, you kind of make them a main character. They can kind of easily follow that story, as opposed
exactly.
to what can sometimes be daunting, which is watching 10 players play. Um, but then again, for the tastosis thing, I'm talking like they talk about basic concepts, like, the idea of the area of effect will hurt more units sometimes, like that type of dumbing it down, which again, they've thought of. They go with it. They think that's the best thing
Yeah,
to do. And that's fine. But then you're bringing in a kind of different, but still equally valid perspective of how do you still kind of go for some of those casuals, but without making them feel like you're talking to them like a child. Because that could be very, very easy to do if you really are hyper focused on trying to
yeah, yeah.
introduce them. Um, so great points. I'd love to ask you about what other points made you kind of feel the way that you felt after DDK and Valdo went into you. Um, do you remember anything else that they said that you needed to improve on?
I remember they laughed at like one joke I made within a cast, and that was almost the icebreaker. I was like, "Ha, I'm funny now." But other than that, no. I just remember the main thing that was like, I was very monotone. Like
Oh,
I basically casted from my bedroom at home, and so like it was almost like one of those things where I didn't want to be massively emotive because I thought, okay, that's embarrassing, and it's like, no,
mm,
realistically, that's the job you're being paid to do. I think a lot of the time it was also sometimes I'd try and focus too much on making the chat or someone laugh rather than actually commentating what's about to happen in the game. It's like you've missed like 15 things you could have spoken about and spoken about something that's irrelevant. And again, I think at times in bad games or early games in tournaments that's fine, but for me those games I showed them were meant to be like the peak of what I'd achieved so far. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't remember a lot, but I know that yeah, basically that chat was sort of a kick in the butt because at that point when you're in the office of someone who's basically like up for casting the CS:GO major final, you already sat there going like, huh, I'm doing pretty good, and then they go, no, you're dog shit, and you go, okay, I'm gonna come back in a few years.
So funny. I can definitely imagine Bartolf saying that, but DDK seems like such a nice guy. Well, not that Bartolf's
No,
not
that's
nice, but different
Yeah,
types of
no, that's the thing though.
personalities.
That was and this is the thing. There is no I wouldn't change a second of that criticism
Mm,
because that was the thing. Like if they had gone in and both of them are nice people. I don't have anything really bad to say about either. DDK is especially nice, I will admit. But the thing with them is it was they knew that giving me the harshest of criticism was the best way for me to improve. So that's why if anybody ever asks me for feedback, I always sort of go, "Are you sure?" Because if I give you feedback, I want it to be brutal so that you'll improve. I don't want to just go like I feel like there are people, and it has definitely happened that message me and go, "Oh, can you review this?" And I go, "Sure," and then I review it, and they go, "I don't really agree." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine. You don't have to." But I feel like a lot of those people want you to go, you're amazing. Come cast a major. Like it's like
yeah.
that's never really going to happen. I think people that was the thing when I asked them for feedback, they gave me what I wanted, even though it was something that was brutal at the time. I
Mhm.
don't regret a second of it.
Yeah, I think there's some people out there who use that type of here, look at my demo, look at my reel as a networking
Yeah,
thing, and then are
yeah,
shocked when it doesn't work out. So yeah, definitely don't be
yeah,
that person. But an earnest, actual like, okay, thank you. I think I disagree on this point, and then having a nice conversation
yeah,
about it.
yeah, yeah.
It's,
No
it's
problems.
that's fine. But I want to kind of end this podcast as we're reaching the end on a maybe very difficult question for you to answer. And
Hmm.
maybe even a bit close to the heart. So in esports, typically there does tend to be this shift towards like, well, this is the finals casting pair.
Yeah,
That's happened in every esport, as far as I can tell. So, some of them do a better job of revolving than others, but for sure, there's certain couples that they're going to get in there and they're going to be cast in the finals, right? You guys have
yeah.
yet to cast a finals, I believe. Well, like of
Yeah,
a
but yeah, I
premier
know.
event, yeah. Okay, just to remind you guys. But
Cheers
no.
and God, I've forgotten honestly. No, I'm kidding.
But this is why I could maybe be like, I don't want to like poke any holes here or poke the bear or
Hmm.
something like that. But what do you guys look at as kind of the 1% step forward here? Because you're so close, right? You're so close. Beloved,
Yeah,
duo, get into the semifinals all the time, casting almost all the events feels like, and it's just like a little bit more. Have you guys discussed this? Have you thought about it? And what are your thoughts on trying to get to that point?
but this is the thing, and this is something I'm very grateful for with the sort of producers and the people at Riot is I can have these conversations with them. Like
Hmm.
I think, and again, this isn't to harp on CS:GO, but obviously Valve is a lot more disconnected from the game. So if I did an event, I didn't really have the feedback because the next person I worked for was somebody else. So it was very difficult to do that. Whereas I can have chats with people at Riot, and I know for a fact that ultimately they value us very highly, which is very important to me. And also, ultimately, we are not far away. Like the basically, I think the thing that and people like Pansy and Hypok, if I'm second to Pansy and Hypok, I am a happy man. I'll be honest with you. Pansy is someone who she'll hate me saying this, but I have been a fan of since I ever started watching CS:GO. So to even be in the conversation with someone like her is an achievement of itself. But also, it's like let's put it this way: if you put me and Mitch in a grand final, and you put Pansy and Hypoc, you have 100% chance of Pansy and Hypoc nailing that final, and you have maybe 85 with us. Like that. That's the way I
Mm,
would look at it. I think the consistency of their commentary is what makes them the best of the best. Like, you know that if there is a highlight moment, Pansy will nail it every time. Like, I don't think that's the thing. I can't think of a bad Pansy cast. And it's not even that me and Mitch will necessarily have a bad cast, but it might not be the best cast we could have. And I think that that would not only destroy us. So I think for us, firstly, it's about consistency. Secondly, it's about sort of building up to those moments. Again, I think that's something, if you watch the way, again, I think Saito and Bren do this quite well, is the way they elevate themselves into a tournament. So, like, if you watch the first game and the last game, they are different because one of them might be a bit more fun, and then the last one will be, this is it. And I think that for us, if we might cast some of the earlier games better because they're better games, whereas when it comes to a grand final, it doesn't matter. That has to be the better game. So for
mm,
us, a lot of it I just think is going to be about consistently casting more, which hopefully over next year will be something we can just do because there's still gaps in schedules and stuff, but also just more. I don't know how to put it. More consistency overall in, like, okay, having crowd matches. I don't think I necessarily would have wanted to have the first final in front of a crowd because ultimately for myself and Mitch that was our first time casting in front of a crowd. So and it was only the last 3 days that actually happened. Now, would I have loved the opportunity, or would I have loved the fact that Riot gave us the faith to do it? Yes, of course. Like, I'm going to take that any day of the week. Do I think they made the right choice? Maybe. Like, I don't know how we would have done it, but I think that that's an awful lot of pressure to put on us. And that would have also been
mm.
our first cast on LAN as a grand final, which is, yes, that's a risk. And then when it comes to champions, I don't think you can choose anyone other than Pansy and Hypoc. So
Mm.
I think that they are a god tier duo. In all honesty, like, it might sound like I'm brown nosing, but I don't really gain anything from doing this. Brown nosing my competition, but no, I think from speaking to, as said, like, the people up at Riot, it will be something that comes with time, and that I think honestly, mine and Mitch's duo, I think we're only going to get better. Like, I think that the more we cast in front of crowds, I think, like, the sheer, like, especially in Turkey, that's probably one of the best moments of my entire life. Like, that and getting to cast in Brazil, which is what we get to do next. Like, Belo Horizonte, I cast in front of, I think it was 10,000 people with Harry. I'm never going to forget that until the day I die. Now, potentially get to do that again in Valorant. I'm so excited for that. So I think that ultimately, the more we cast in front of a crowd, the more we're going to play off of that energy. And hey, maybe one day we'll rival the big boss at Pansy. But I hope it will happen at some point. But I I think it's something that's definitely a goal for both of us. But it's not like I'm not going to be devastated to my core if, like, say for example this year. I would hope, but
Mm.
who knows?
That's a it's potentially dangerous minefield that I walk into if I ask these types of questions to different types
Yeah.
of people. Some will play it off kind of like, oh well, I'm not really focusing on it. And some will be correct actually. Some will,
Mm.
but telling the truth.
I will just in case someone from Rise. I do want to cast a final.
There you go.
Don't ever
Yeah.
get that in your mind. I would love to.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Make sure that's out there. I do actually legitimately think that is important for like branding is to just be like very clear of your
Yeah.
intentions. But no, and, some other people they'll kind of him and ha and kind of avoid the whole conversation about their feelings on who are currently casting the finals.
No.
And there's kind of something there. But you nothing but respect and
No,
admiration for
I think,
the duo.
yeah, I think the both the duos that have done finals are good enough to do finals.
Hmm.
Like, if there was someone who had gone above us that I don't think was worthy of doing it, maybe I would be a little bit more bitter about it. But
Hmm.
as said, like, I think we have fantastic commentators in Valorant that, again, I think with the game so fresh, that's only going to improve over time. And honestly, there's a part of me that really likes that because I think if me and Mitch had got a final in Valorant, it might have been because the people who came over weren't very good. because we are a fresh duo.
Mm,
Like we've only been consistently casting together for like a year and a half, 2 years now. It's not been a massive amount of time. Like we didn't really cast during ignition. It was only when things actually properly came into like the VCT, which and I think even then, one of the first events we did was a Masters, which still doesn't make a lot of sense. I think the first day of casting was before it became international Masters. It was these like regional Masters, and we did one day, and that was enough. I wasn't on the VCT at that point. That was enough for them to go. Actually, we'll get you now as a
okay.
duo. So it yeah, we've moved quickly, but still a few hurdles to go. But I think if we'd reached the top that fast, I would almost be worried that
Mm,
there's no one for us to compete with almost,
yeah.
because that's the thing. I want to one day be able to say I'm on the level of Pansy and Hypok. If I do that, then I've succeeded in my career.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think the future is pretty bright for you guys as well as
Thank you.
Valorant as a whole. I think that goes without saying. Really, Valorant seems doing very very well. Sounds awesome.
Mm,
You guys gonna be going to Brazil because by all like literally on my second screen
fingers
right now.
crossed.
Yeah, that's true. I guess nothing's announced yet. But yeah, hopefully you guys go. Yeah, but the CS:GO event that's happening there is obviously doing it a lot of credit as far as a place to
Yeah,
go for esports. Nothing but cheering going
I love
on.
it.
Yeah,
I've
it's really
been
cool.
I've been 3 times to Brazil, and every single
Yeah,
event was an absolute banger.
yeah, yeah. I'm jealous for sure. Envious, envious. But yeah, I hope you guys get to go, and as you were saying, I hope you guys get to the finals because you are the best. You get to deserve it, and all
I'll
good
wait
things,
until
man.
Pansy's on this podcast, and we'll see what's said then.
I would love to talk to her, man. Definitely. As soon as I found out about her, I don't know how many years ago, I was like, oh
Mm,
shit, there's actually someone doing this because this was also 7, 8 years ago when
yeah.
yeah, as far as like woman commentators,
I
there
I
weren't a whole
actually I
lot.
casted with her once, I think in like CS. It was for like some UK Gfinity event. So
Ah, Gfinity.
that was a cool moment. I want to be careful though, because I don't want to blow too much smoke up our ass, because you don't want to give these people egos. They're already there.
Of course not. Yeah. I don't want to talk to her either. I don't want to be on my podcast.
Yeah,
Well.
Pansy who? Nah.
Thank you again so much for coming on, talking about your experience, answering some potentially difficult questions as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. Where will you be next? I guess because this is an off season. Are you doing videos, streaming, anything like that?
Well, the next event will be the Red Bull Homeground, which is
Oh,
going to be a lot of fun. Like that's
yeah.
in Manchester, so we're in the UK. There's going to be a small crowd as well, which so that'll be a lot of fun, and some of the new franchise, well, not partnership teams. So that's going to be a fun event. I'm really looking forward to that. Still 3 teams to be announced, but also the talent for that is I well, yeah, I'm friends with every single person on the list, so I'm looking forward to that one quite a lot. So that'll be next, but yeah, also going to try and pump out some content, but I've got to try again, stop watching Doctor Who and play video games. But I put out a video today, so there you go.
There you go.
That's something at least.
Yeah. I love looking at my to-do list and seeing 5 videos on the docket.
Mm.
That I might never get around to, but yeah, that is the challenge. But another event not too far in the future. That's awesome that Red Bull is also doing stuff. Red Bull, well, again, envious of anything they do with any other esport. Um, but yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone out there who's watched or listened, that is. I either one goes up on YouTube as well as any of the podcast apps. Thank you to Shayne and Vlad IV for the co producing of the podcast and Barrett for helping to organize it. And thank you for the people who go above and beyond on Patreon, patreon.com/zombiegrub. Nick, Vinny, Steven, ET, Ravi, and CuddleBunny. Thank you guys so much for supporting. Hope to see you all back here for episode 63. Bye bye.